Welcome back, everyone. My SIG order came in. I have my new canopy for the Cougar. I'll cut that out here later on, and then I'll get ready to start the main part of the video. I bought both decal sheets for the original color scheme version for the Cougar. Have all the letters on this side. And on this one, you have the chevrons, the stars, and the thunder chicken. I don't know if I'm gonna paint this on my Cougar. It'd be a little time consuming, and the idea is to get it flying here. So basically I'm not going to use these decals at all. The reason I bought them is to measure them out so I have a more accurate outline of what they are on the plane. Along with the chevrons, these are all going to be painted on, and the stars. Even though it's going to take a lot more time, it's going to look better in the long run, and it'll never peel off or anything like that. And I don't have to put any kind of clear coat on it, put it that way, to make sure that the fuel don't seep underneath. And I also picked up a canopy. This is a World War II canopy. I already opened it. This is their 11-inch World War II canopy. And you probably know what plane it's going to go on, but I'll bring it up here just the same. Here it is again. This is the Hawker Typhoon. I know you remember seeing this already. This will be the replacement canopy. And it's pretty much an exact fit, even though it's not the same manufacturer, but it looks almost identical. I bet you that that this canopy is not the original either, even though it has some molding marks that don't look the same. But that's where it's going to go. I'm going to start working on this shortly and start stripping it down and see if I can get it ready sometime for this flying season. And with that, I am going to roll the intro, cut out my canopy for the Cougar, and get started with this next segment of Under the Canopy. Kits, I think, are the way to go because you don't have that cookie cut. Actually, fiberglassing, painting, if you roll it forward, just kind of press it like this. Hard as a brick bat for a leading edge. One last thing on tip blocks is that you want to cut outside of the line. SIG Cougar Build Part 8, the formers. We are on step 29 of the manual. Come back. This is Part 9 of the SIG Cougar Build. This is a SIG Cobra. It's the 20 size version. I have the canopy cut out. It took me a whopping 15 minutes to get it all cut out and trimmed. And then I was interrupted, so it had to sit for a little while. Okay, let me take that off for a second. Reach over here and grab the manual. This will take us all the way back to step 85. And step 85 wants us to glue, or wants me to glue, or us, if you're working with me, and I know some of you are. I need to glue this 1/8-inch piece of balsa on the top of this turtle deck, or the front of this area here, for the canopy support. You can see I set the canopy on and held it down and drew with a felt marker with a little Sharpie a line around the canopy. And since the canopy is approximately 1/64 of an inch thick, I need to measure in from that line a 1/64 of an inch and glue in my rail along that curved sides of the canopy and in the front. However, on my plane, on this particular plane, I'm going to glass it. So this section of the fuselage has to have fiberglass put on it. So that will be the first thing I do, is lay down a piece of glass. I'll show you that. It won't take very much time at all. And then I will glue on the 1/8-inch piece of balsa. And then we'll work on something like this. This is the cockpit out of that Mediterranean blue camouflage Cougar that I show at the end of the video and the pictures. And what I plan on doing is showing you how to make the front console and the headrest. I'm just going to reuse this Pilot. There's not much wrong with him. He's just a little old. I've had this guy, and I would say, let me think here. He's been in my last 5 Cougars I've had, so he's been around a while. He's had his head ripped off on a few wrecks, so he's been put back together several times. He's been painted several times, and to a point where the paint is so thick, over time it's starting to crack. So I'm going to have to take some mineral spirits and wipe them all off, because I'm going to use tester's paint just to repaint it. And the headrest is going to be painted with enamel. You can use testers or whatever your favorite brand of enamel. And all that's just glued down to the fiberglass surface. I'm going to also show you how to make the instrument cluster. I don't think you can see it very well, but these instruments have depth. They just don't look like a sticker or anything. If you want to use a sticker, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But on my instruments, what I like to do is I'll have the instrument board itself, the panel, and there'll be a hole for that the gauge, and around that hole on the outside of the face of the instrument panel is going to be a little bezel that goes around the hole, and then behind that will be a clear piece of plastic, and behind the clear piece of plastic will be a little depth piece to give the a three-dimensional look to the gauge, and behind that will be the face of the gauge, and glued to that face will be a little needle. So everything's going to have depth. It's going to be a stacked type situation. And I'll show you how to do that. If you ever go into scale and you want to build a really nice scale model and you want to do a dashboard, this will be a really good thing to know how to do. It'll bring that little extra pop, a little more eye candy for people to look at your plane. They'll go, wow, look at that, you know. And you'll need a focal point. Every airplane has a focal point, something that people like to look at. Whether it's a bunch of little antennas on a scale model, or a fancy scoop on the side or underneath. There's really not much to look at as far as the Cougar goes, except the cockpit. So the cockpit is going to be your focal point of your airplane. You could have all kinds of nice markings, and that could be the focal point. But the Cougar really doesn't have a lot of nice markings. The tail is cluttered with stars, with the red going around this vertical stabilizer and on the horizontal stabilizer. But yeah, that looks nice. But once you get past that and start looking deeper into the model, you'll come to the cockpit, and everybody looks at a cockpit. Oh, let's say, oh, there's a troll doll or something in there. But when you see a cockpit with a pilot that looks correct, a dashboard that has depth that looks real, then people will go, oh yeah, well, that's pretty cool, and that'll turn into the focal point of the plane. And I'll show you how to kind of make a nice, simple instrument panel. You'll need to use your printer for the dial faces if you don't have the face for the dial. It's not hard to do. So I'm going to put this off to the side, and after a while I have things I have to do today, so this is a spur of the moment thing. And when I get back, I'll break out the polyester resin and my fiberglass and show you a little bit of glassing on the top of the fuselage. There'll be more to come. Pretty soon I'll be having to do the wings, the fuselage, and all that good stuff, and I'll show you how to do curves and things like that. So I guess I'm gonna have to get myself in gear and get going, and when I get back, we'll get started. I got my running around done, and while I was out, let me show you what I bought. I bought a nice little stack of balsa wood, 16th, 3/32, a quarter, and let's see what else I got in here. I think that's it. 16th, yeah, 3/32 and quarter inch. And what I do every time I go to the hobby shop, I buy a little bit of balsa wood just to stack up, because I have a really nice project coming up, and it's going to be the Dave Platt 88-inch Spitfire. I bought the short kit several years ago and just never built it. Maybe I'll do a unboxing of that. But I did buy that. More mixing cups. Had to have more mixing cups. And some gas fuel line for my other planes. And for the Cougar, I didn't realize it, but I ran out of regular fuel line, so I had to pick some of that up. All right. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the glass, the fiberglass things I use, the tools, the glass. We'll talk about that real quick. I've done this before, I know, and I just want to get it into your mind that glassing is easy. It's not hard if you can get past the little bit of smell it makes. My wife doesn't like it. I grew up with it. My dad taught me how to do this way back early 80s, late 70s. I can't remember which. I think it was more like late 70s. I was still in high school. So anyways, we'll start off with the polyester resin. The kind of resin you want to use for glassing is a Class B resin. SIG sells some really good Class B resin. It's a little pricey, but it works really well. I use the Bondo brand myself. I get this at Lowe's, all those lumber places usually sells some Bondo in there, where they do where they have their paint sprayers and things. Home Depot, Walmart, your auto parts store. But this is a Class B resin, this particular one. And it says on here, just fiberglass resin. It doesn't say that it does anything more than that. But this particular resin is a Class B resin. It has wax in it. So when it dries, that wax comes to the surface, makes it a hard, dry surface. If you buy a layup resin, a Class A resin, it stays tacky. And that's for laying more layers of fiberglass on. I do have some of that also, but I won't be pulling that out right now. I also need to tell you that the Bondo brand, excuse me, the Bondo brand resin, polyester resin, is a little thicker than the SIG resin. I love the consistency of the SIG resin, but the Bondo brand just isn't quite there, so I went and bought some polyester resin thinner, and the right thinner for that is styrene monomer. I buy this from US Composites. It's a little pricey. I can't exactly remember what I paid, but it's a little more than I expected to pay, plus shipping, because it's hazmat shipping. But it lasts a long time. You don't use very much of it. And what I do is I use this to thin out the Bondo. The ratio is either 10 to 20 to 1. So you have 10 parts of the resin to 1 part. Well, let's do it this way. Percents. Whatever you use of the resin, use about 10 to 20% of that would be your thinner. So if you have 100 parts of resin, then you want 10 to 20 parts of thinner. Okay, acetone, you can buy this anywhere, Walmart, auto body places, auto parts stores. Acetone, just use it for cleanup. 1 ounce mixing cups, because 1 ounce is a lot of resin when you're working on a model and brushing it on. And the cure time of the resin is so quick that you will just barely have time to spread out 1 ounce of resin. So 1 ounce mixing cups. Catalyst for the Bondo, or for the polyester resin. stir sticks of any kind. I use this dental stir stick. Got this from my dentist. You can buy these probably at Hobby Lobby or a good craft store. Popsicle sticks work well. I got a whole bunch of those. I don't use them, but I have them. Brushes. This is a number 10. Matter of fact, they're all number 10 brushes. This is a nylon brush. This is a nylon brush. And the reason I like the nylon brushes is that once you use these after a while, they start to build up real close to the metal here. And when it dries, you can bend it and crack off and get all the extra polyester resin. This one has such a big buildup that I haven't got it all out of there yet, but it's coming out slowly. I haven't really worked on it, so I've been tossing that to a side and using this one. These are hair brushes. I'm not sure what kind of hair they are. These are number 10s. They're just simple artist hairbrush. You can, they're different lengths too. I found the shorter they are, the stiffer they are, the longer they are, the more of a draw you can get on them, and it holds a little more resin to go a little further. So these are nice to have. I don't use these because I haven't found a good use or good reason to mess them up yet. But I do use these. After a while, you'll end up using these up real quick. But if you keep cleaning them every single time you use them, they'll last you a while. Okay, that's brushes, stir sticks, cups. This is a drafting brush. You can get these at any drafting store or Staples or someplace like that that sells drafting equipment. And drafting people use this to brush off their drawings of eraser dust or whatever. I'll tell you what we're going to use this for when I get to it. When we use it on the model, it'll become more self-explanatory when I show you. Scissors to cut fiberglass. These are just regular old-fashioned manual scissors. You can buy these fairly cheap anywhere. I don't use these unless I have to. I only use those when the batteries of my electric scissors go dead. I have found that the electric scissors will cut fiberglass better and quicker than these. Let me move some of this stuff out of the way and I'll give you a little demonstration. In a second, I'm going to roll out some glass here. Oh. Okay. What I'm going to use on the Cougar is 0.56 ounce cloth. Fiberglass cloth. You can see how super thin that is. It almost is as light as silk. The reason I'm using this light of glass is I don't need the strength, because my strength is built into the framework of the fuselage and wings anyways. So I don't need the strength. What I need is something to seal the wood. When you glass, you want to use the cloth. You could put polyester right straight onto the wood and then sand that smooth and primer and fill or whatever you want to do. But eventually, the wood is going to expand and contract with the humidity, and eventually it's going to split. And I've had this happen before. I've seen other guys do that when I was experimenting with polyester resin. So you don't want to put polyester resin directly on the wood, because eventually it will split, especially if you plan on having the plane a long time. If you're not planning on having it a long time, then have at it. But what the fiberglass will do is it covers it up and keeps the wood from splitting. It's like an ace bandage around it that's glued on permanently. So it will never split. And even this light cloth, I've never had a problem with the wood splitting. Okay. Let me show you the difference. I got some 3/4 ounce here. And I can show you the difference. I'll put my hand behind this. Okay, you can see that versus, if I can get it to go here. All right, it's being a troublesome thing. All right, now you can see the difference. This is the 3/4 ounce. This is the 0.56. Now, where to buy it? I go online to buy this cloth. There's a place called Thaircraft. They have a, I'll put it up on the screen, the web address, and they sell it by the roll. This is, I can't remember how big of a roll this was. I've had this for like 5 years now, and I've done giant scale planes, small planes. It lasts a long time, but this is 26 inches wide, and I believe they sell it in 10-foot rolls, and this was more than 10 foot, but at the time when I bought it. They sell in 10-foot rolls. I'm not really sure the price. I haven't been on there in a while. But it's labeled as model airplane fiberglass. I'll put the exact web address on the screen here. So you can just go to it, and they sell different kinds of weaves too. This is just a standard weave. They sell bidirectional weave, which will wrap around a baseball. And you could actually fiberglass a baseball with this stuff because it lays perfectly around a curved surface just beautifully. But I've never had a reason to buy it or use it. I've seen people use it, but I've never used it myself. I've never built a fuselage that was that curve, has that much curve into it that I'd have to use a bidirectional, but it'd be good to have. It's a little more pricey than this. Okay. I wanted to demonstrate the scissors. Now, standard scissors, yeah, they're good, but you have to make sure they are sharp, otherwise they'll snag. And these are pretty sharp. They can give me a nice straight cut. If you need a nice straight cut, I would use the hand scissors. But if you're just zipping off a chunk, like I'm going to do for the front of this Cougar, you just take your electric scissors. Let me get it up in here. And you can see that it takes time with the regular scissors, but electric scissors, just zip right through it. I kind of stopped the scissors before I got through, but it's much easier to cut, quicker to cut. You don't take very long. And that's why I use electric. It saves me on some time. Now, I'd like to recommend a good surface to lay out your fiberglass, otherwise it'll snag. And this stuff snags easy. You can see my fingers are a little rough on the edges, and I snagged the cloth and it will leave a little snag mark. It doesn't matter when you put it on your plane because there's going to be polyester resin to fill up the gaps, and it's not going to hurt nothing in the long run. But your tabletop should be clean of dust. It should be smooth. It shouldn't have any little snags or anything on it. That's why I like using glass, because when you clean it, I use a single edge razor blade. Here it is. Or one of these utility scrapers. And I'll just go across my glass and make sure there's no glue or anything sticking up on it. And I've already done that to this top. Okay, that pretty much goes through all of this. Can't think of anything else. So let me grab the fuselage. I'll bring that over and we'll start on the top of the Cougar. I've mixed up my polyester resin. I added my styrene monomer to it and thinned it. And it is, I mixed this 10-to-1. I also brought out a jar, baby food jar, put some acetone in it for cleanup in a little while. I said I was going to show you what we're going to use this brush for. And what I use it for is to create some static electricity. And when you do that, it helps lay the glass down real good to the wood. The static holds it in place. I'm not going to bring this up too far onto the headrest area. Try to get it as straight as I can. There we go. And there's excess on both sides. We'll worry about that later. There's quite a bit of static on there. I need to catalyze my polyester resin. And they say 10 to 12 drops. I'm sure I've said that many times. I only have 10 cc of polyester resin, so 5 drops would be about right, but a quick squirt will do it. Let me mix this up. It's going to be a little out of camera. And it's pretty thin. It's just the right consistency I like to use polyester resin at. Okay, set this down. My number 10 nylon brush. Get a lot of the excess off here. And I'm just going to dab it at first just to get it to stay in one place, get it to stick down. But I'm going to put a lot on here so it soaks all the way through the fabric. You don't want no bubbles or fabric that has no polyester resin on, because you want it to all be covered. Now I'm going to take it around the side of the fuselage. And what I'm doing is I'm working the glass to the outside. You can see it's picking up some wrinkles, and I'm moving the wrinkles out. I want a good layer of glass. Let me come around to my side here. When I lay the glass on the sides of the fuselage, it will overlap. And I'm not going to trim the cloth until after the polyester resin dries. And I make sure I go around the edge or past the edge a little bit. Helps you trim it off. But I want a good heavy amount of resin on here. And you're probably thinking, yeah, that's going to be heavy if you keep putting that much resin on there. And you're right. It will be heavy if I leave this much resin on there, but I'm not going to. I will show you what I'm going to do here in a second. And one thing about fiberglass resin, polyester resin, is you can sand it. Epoxy resins, you can't sand so much. But this layer of resin, I'm just really socking it to it because I want it to be saturated where I put the resin. Come around this curve just a little bit. I'll trim the excess off later. Okay, that's all I need. First thing I do, clean my brush. Major number 1 step of completion, clean the brush. My old man, my dad used to get so mad at me because I'd wait too long to clean the brush, and I would kill his brushes off in a hurry. And I was a kid, I was a teenager. I tell you what, I've never seen a guy get so upset about a brush before. But he drilled it into my head to clean my brushes, especially when he cut me off and I had to buy my own. Okay, that's pretty good. It's doesn't take a whole lot to clean it. Set this off to the side. Now, the fun part. What I use is a squeegee of some kind. What it is just a Bondo spreader, like this. But I cut it up into pieces. And what I do is I'm going to take the excess off of the glass here. So I don't know if you can see it, but watch in front of the spreader. See all the resin that it's picking up? Take that right off of there. And there's a lot. So I wanted to exaggerate it a little bit so you could see. You might think that you want to take this resin that you squeegee off and use it somewhere else, but I don't recommend that, because for some reason when you remove the resin like this, whatever you take off won't dry. It'll stay goopy, kind of more than sticky, more than tacky. It's goopy, and it never dries. So I don't know why, but that's the way it is. I can't see too well on this side, so I'm hoping it's laying correctly. If not, that's okay. I can fix it later. But you see how much rolls up there in front of that? See that? I'm taking all that extra off. If you don't do this part and you skip this part, you will probably end up with a very heavy model. And what I'm doing is just basically pushing the fiberglass tight to the wood to a point where there's no air under it. There's fiberglass or polyester resin in the fiberglass, and it pushes the polyester resin into the wood, makes a real good seal, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. All right, one more time, just to be sure. Got some kind of a fuzz there. Fuzz really don't matter because it will come off in the sanding process. That looks pretty good. I need to clean my spreader off, so I just dip it in the acetone and wipe it off with paper towel. Got a little on my paper towel to help out. And that's it. Now we wait. The resin's dry. And what I need to do is trim off the excess. And the best way I found is with a knife on around the edges, because when I put the resin on, I went beyond what I really needed. And that little bit of resin makes it that much easier to cut, because it's just a very little bit of resin. And it's much harder to cut just plain. As you can see, it frays just the regular fiberglass without anything on it. But I think the best way is with a piece of sandpaper. This is 220, and you just start stroking it, and it'll cut through the glass cloth flush to where you finish putting down your resin. And it leaves you with a nice edge. Now all you have to do is rub it. You really don't have to sand it. I'll do this other side here. But this is my favorite way of doing things as far as getting rid of the fiberglass. This piece of paper has about had it, but I'm using it anyways. And it gives me a nice flush finish to the edge of my polyester resin. You might notice on the front where I took my first squeegee load of polyester resin off the edge. It made quite a little bump right in here. It really doesn't matter because I can get that off with a Dremel tool with a sanding drum, so that's that. Next, what I need to do is take this Scotch-Brite pad and rub it on this surface to take the waxy coat off that the Class B resin has. I could have used a laminating resin for this, you would think, and I could have, but it's just as easy to do it this way. And just rub the Scotch-Brite pad on here. Give it a good wipe, and it'll start. You can see it starting to pick up some of the wax. This part is not a difficult thing to do, but it will take you a few minutes. All right, I think that's good enough. And normally, I think I might have mentioned this before, I'd start with the bottom of the plane and fiberglass the bottom, then the sides, the tail surfaces and all that underneath, and then go to the top and finish the top last, just like I was monocoating. But like I said, it's not necessary. It doesn't really matter. But what's really going to matter is I have to put another coat of polyester resin over the top of this. It's called a flow coat. And it just evens out the finish, fills in all the grain of the fiberglass, all the weave, and leaves you with a real nice flat surface, hard surface. And you don't have to worry about, when you sand it, you don't have to worry about going through the weave of the cloth. So let me mix up some more polyester resin, and I'll be back and we'll put the flow coat on. I mixed up another 10 cc of polyester resin and with a 1 cc of styrene monomer, the thinner. And now what I'm going to do is put on a generous coat of resin. I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. And the reason for that is this flow coat should go over the whole aircraft at one time to keep things even. But since I need to put on the side, the fuselage side covering it, I'm going to leave a little bit on here so it can lay more flush with the other fiberglass. So I'm just doing the very top, but I'm putting a lot on here. Spreading it out as evenly as I can, making sure all the weave is filled. And when you're done with it, you can tell whether the weave is full or not, because it shows. But what I want to do is get everything that's going to be under the canopy, because that's what this is all about, is under the canopy. And yeah, I'm doing this a little bit out of turn, but the purpose is to show you what's going to happen underneath the canopy. Right now I'm kind of dragging it out because I see little bubbles that I don't want. That looks really good. Okay. There's a flow coat. See how nice and shiny and smooth that looks? It's not really perfectly smooth, but I'm going to take some sandpaper to it, some 320, maybe some 60 grit right off the bat, knock it down, and then use 80 grit. Then I'll knock it down, smooth it out with maybe 220 and go to 320 and get a nice flush finish. And then we'll go from there. I've already started sanding on this a little bit. I got half of it done. I went to the center line with 80 grit, and I've gone over it with 220, which is some of this. And now I'm going over it with a little 320 just on this one side, just to smooth it out, get most of the sanding marks off. And I just wanted you to see the difference between the unsanded and the sanded. You can see this is the sanded part's duller, and that other side's still shiny. And I'll go over it with the 80 grit, take it down to level. You see it's making lots of dust here. Like I said, this is one of the reasons I like using the polyester resin over the epoxy resin, because I can manipulate it more than I can the epoxy. Okay, getting pretty good. I'm going to switch over to the 220. I'm going to have to tear a little chunk of this off. And it's making a little more dust. And last but not least, 320. Clean some of this extra dust off. Making it nice and level. All the way across. And I can see some imperfections in here that I didn't see before, like little pinholes. Nothing I'm going to worry about. That's what primer's for. Get a little bit of this headrest area. Smooth it out. That's pretty good. I'm going to take a little of the glaze off of the headrest, because that's going to have to be all covered up with polyester resin, or maybe a piece of styrene plastic. I don't know. I'll probably use styrene so it makes a nice transition from the back to the floor underneath the canopy in the cockpit area. I might even lay a chunk of styrene in here. That'll give me a nice smooth base, but I haven't decided yet. So this part is pretty much done as far as putting on the glass. I don't feel any weave anymore. It's really smooth. So I believe it's time to go with the stick. And this will be glued on just inside, or even with the outside of the turtle deck here, but inside my lines, and I'll tack that down. I just want to take a look at it here. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'll tack it down with some CA. And I'm just gonna do a little bit at a time here. How am I gonna do this? I think I'm just gonna mark it. I can't find it. Here we go. I'm gonna need about this much. I'm gonna cut this off. Okay. Okay. There we go. I'm just gonna put a little bead. This is medium CA. Just gonna run a small bead down the edge of the stick here. One time good deal. Don't dare make a mistake. Just inside of my felt marker line. About like that. Let it dry for a second or two. There's one. You're probably wondering why I didn't go all the way to the end, and that's because I'm going to lay that last piece across the front. And since the slope is extreme on the front of the canopy, it doesn't really have to go all the way to the front. We'll get this other side here. I'll make it the same length as the other one just for fun. Doesn't have to be, but it makes life a little easier if they're the same length or close to it. Okay, cut this dude off real quick. Give me a second. Okay. Put on some CA. On the edge. That looks good. Like that. These will have to be sanded regardless because they're square and you got a oval coming down to it, so the top edge usually has to be sanded to get it out of the way. And I'll cut this guy off. Something like this. Little CA. We'll give that a couple of minutes to dry up real good before I start carving and sanding on it. Well, we just completed step 85, and that's putting on the rails for the canopy. Now we're down to 86 here, fitting the canopy to the rails, or actually fitting the rails to the canopy. And how I'm going to do that, I use a T-bar sander. And since the rails stick out at the top more than they do at the bottom, because the bottoms are flush with the edge, but since the curvature of the turtle deck is there, the top corners are sticking out. So what I do is I lay my T-bar sander on here and just start sanding off that little bit of an edge, which isn't much. It doesn't take very long. And the other side. Okay, next, let me grab the canopy. It's going to be this front part because that has a slope. This is very, like I said, it's very extreme. And it's going to sit up in the air. This sits nice. Now it's just getting this shape right up in the front. And that I'm going to use a little heavier sandpaper. I'm going to go with 80 grit because there's a lot to take off. And let me look at this again. It's gonna have to go back to about about here and slopes to 0 right down here. And here down to 0 here. To make kind of a diagonal line. And I'll start with that. And I'll grind this down. With 80 grit, make short work of it. You can use a knife, which I'm probably going to do just to get it down a little quicker. And I'll sand it in the rest of the way. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. It's going to be close. Very close, a little bit more. I might have to round these corners just a hair bit more. I think I'll use a knife on the corners to bring it in. Just a shave. Okay, and a little bit more off the top. Find it better. Getting my sandpaper wore out by doing all this sanding on the fiberglass. See how we look here. It's close to what I want, not quite. It needs to go back just a hair more. Just a fraction. That means I have to lower the front end a little bit. Maybe carve a little bit more off of this corner here. Yeah, I can see that. It's going to have to happen. Now I don't have to worry about running my model knife through the polyester resin because it's so hard. It takes a lot to scratch it. Take a little off the side over here. Okay. And where are we sticking up at? I can see it sticking up. It's on this corner yet. I'm going to take a little bit more of an angle on the edges here. And I'm still a little high on this side. This side looks pretty good, but I got to take a little more off of the top of the rail here. I might as well do it to the opposite side too. Using the 80 grit to just do it quicker. And that's what I'm looking for. There it is. Turn it, you can see it sitting flush in the front. Right up on my line, which is way up here. It's sitting down tight. And that's all I'm going to do with the canopy for now, because it's ready to glue on, really, if I wasn't going to put anything inside the cockpit. So now we have to do the cockpit, and then when the cockpit's done, we can drop the canopy on, glue it, and that'll be the end of that. This little segment is going to take a little bit more brain power for me. It took me a while to set it up. This is one part that I just couldn't do on the fly. I had to actually sit down, think it up, so I could show you how I made this and the backrest. They don't look that difficult, and they really aren't. But I figured if I'm going to show you how to do it, I might as well show you everything. So I drew it all out and made some parts, and I'll explain it to you real quick. The first thing I do is I take my drawing here and I cut out balsa parts for it. This is 1/16 balsa, and these are the side pieces. I have to make 2 of these, And there they are. And the face of the instrument panel, which is here. You might not be able to see that because I'm looking at the monitor and it looks very much like it's glared to a point where you can't see it. And the top piece for this. So you got the two side pieces. And you see I destroyed the instrument panel getting out the little instruments. I'm going to reuse those. And the top. And the next thing to do really, once you have your parts cut out, is set up your instrument panel, which I will in a little bit. And what I like doing also is once I get the ball saw cut out and put into shape and the part is made, I will cut out some styrene plastic. You can buy this at your local hobby store, any place where they sell trains. A good hobby shop for trains will carry styrene. This is 10 thousandths, very thin. Comes from a place called Evergreen. It says Evergreen Scale Products. This is a multi-pack. This has 10 thousandths, 20 thousandths, and 40 thousandths thick sheeting. I'll get these out just to show you. I keep my scraps in there too, so I've got a lot of scraps, but this is the 20 and the 40, which is pretty thick. But I mainly use 10 thousandths because it's flexible, and it's easy to paint. And you can use an acrylic putty on the corners and sand it in before you paint it, and the seams all disappeared. It's real good. But what I do is I cut out the plastic parts, the same as the parts that I'm using. These will all be glued on after I get it put together, which will give me a real good surface to paint on. You won't see wood grain or anything like that. Yeah, it is a little weight, but not enough to even think about, so that's that. And the paper parts, those pieces, I cut out of the paper, and what I do is, instead of just sitting them down and tracing them out and cutting it, I will use a product called, let me grab it here, "3M Super 77. It's a spray adhesive. You only need to put it on one side. And what I do is I take my paper piece and I'll spray the paper side real light, set it aside, do all of them, and by the time you're done, it's dry enough that you stick it right on the balsa wood. Just lay it on the balsa wood and it'll stay there. And you can take your knife and cut around it, and then when you're done, this will peel right up, and it won't even leave any adhesive on the balsa wood. It's great for that kind of thing. And I'm a kind of guy who likes to make templates of things before I actually put them together, and that comes in real handy, especially if you're doing ribs. If you're going to build a plane with ribs and you got a whole bunch of rib sizes and you got them all cut out in paper, you just spray this on the paper rib, lay it down on your wood, and you can set them up to where you want them and cut them all out of one piece. You know, make an arrangement so you don't waste wood. It's really handy. Okay, let's see. Like I said, all this stuff will be this when it's done. This one I didn't put styrene on. I was in a hurry, and I just sanded the wood really good, and I sprayed black plastic enamel on it, tester's paint. But what I'm looking for is, I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom in and I'll show you this. Now you should have a good close-up view of the plans. And on your left is the simple backrest, which is this guy right here. I drew it all out, and you can see how it's made. Side view, front view. The back, there's nothing special. It's just an open hole. But that's that. That's also made out of all 16th except for this part down here, which is 3/16, and it gives it that little bit of a shape and adds a little bit more to the look. That, oh, let me hold it up. This base right here, 3/16. It sticks out a little bit, but it adds a little bit to the look, the overall look of it. But like I said, it's simple. There's not much to it. And on the Cougar I'm going to build, or that I'm building now, I'm going to go with this more advanced backrest. That'll be the top part of the ejection seat. And what you see right here is the left side view. And there's going to be little plastic strips glued to the balsa wood. I don't have this one drawn out or anything. It's just going to be a basic box. You can see the basic shape is going to be a box. There'll be a cavity in here. And the ejection seat loops for the pilot. You got a little headrest right here. And this is just what I've seen on other like jets and things. When you look at the ejection seat, there's a mini packet up here. And I'm not sure what it does or what it's for. And the main chute is back here, and it's in a pack. And that pack is actually attached to this with snaps or something. But I'm not going to do nothing like that. It's just going to sit in there and add space. And I believe these two pieces here, I'm going to make out of Bondo, and I'll show you some of that when I get to it. Making something like this is like making a miniature model in itself. It takes a little time, but your end results are going to be pretty good. I figured, since I was showing you the ejection seat and the backrest, I'll show you real quick the plans up close of the instrument panel setup. And the shroud, like I said, two sides. Got the front panel, the top, and actually this panel doesn't sit flush. It sits back in just a little bit to give it some depth. So when you look at it, it's kind of sunk in. It's hidden under the hood a little bit, and it makes it look a little nicer. All right, that is just about it for the show and tell part and the schematics. Let's get putting this thing together. I just noticed this video is getting a little long. I'd like to keep around an hour because it takes a long time to upload. Internet speeds up this way are not that great, so I'm going to cut it off right here. But actually I'm going to keep on filming, but I'm going to cut it off right here for this video, and we'll pick it up on the next one. And you're probably wondering why it was so long. I did it from my last video to this one. In Michigan, the weather is it can be vile, to say the least. We went from nice mid-30s, a little snow on the ground, and then all of a sudden Mother Nature dropped the bottom out of it, and we went to a -27 wind chill. And with the water on the ground and on the roof, it made a quick freeze of it, and it did some damage around the house. I found in my model shop number 2, I gotta explain that, don't I? This is my number 1 model shop. This is my main shop where I do all the grinding and sanding and painting and stuff. And a different part of the house is a room I haven't used in 10 years, and I just converted it to a model shop. And I'll be filming up there and probably towards the spring. But what happened was the water got up under my shingles. This is in my model shop number 2, and quick froze and lifted the shingles up, and then it went from this -27 degrees, and within 2 days it was 43 degrees after we got another 2 foot of snow, and it lifted up the shingles, and I'm getting water into my model shop. So I'm gonna have to do some re-roofing. No fun, but yeah, it's been crazy. So besides going to swap meets have started up. I just went to one down in Ann Arbor, pretty awesome. That's like almost 100 and some odd mile drive from here. But this coming up weekend is 2 more on the same day, and I can only hit 1. So I got to pick between Detroit or New Lothrop, which is north of Lansing, south of Chesaning, if you know Michigan at all. And that's still about 75-mile drive or something like that. So I gotta pick. That's a hard choice. Detroit sounds better because there's more people down there, more stuff. Who knows? I gotta weigh the costs. So I'm going to sign off right here, and when I come back, we'll pick up on this. I might have some of this put together. I might not. I'm not too sure, because gluing something like this together is not a big deal, and I don't know if it's worth showing. I'll debate that within the next few minutes, and but definitely putting on the plastic parts and showing you all that might be well worth it, and the headrest too. So I'm going to pick it up from this point, and by the time we're done with the next video, we should have a couple of pieces in our hands getting ready to glue it on to the fuselage. So until then, have a good one.